The agenda is sponsored by Newcastle County Government.
This week on the agenda, we're going to sit down with State Representative Mike Smith from the 22nd District. That's the Pike Creek Valley. He's going to talk to us about a lot of things this week. We're going to talk about mail order wine. We're going to talk about gambling. We're going to talk about infrastructure, and we're also going to talk about ethics. That's right, ethics in the State House for all employees and House representatives as well as Senate representatives. Representative Mike Smith.
Sir, how are you?
Great. Thank you for joining us here on the agenda.
Of course.
And you currently represent the 22nd District here in Delaware.
Yes, sir.
Which is the Pike Creek Valley.
Yeah, so about half Pike Creek, half Hockessin.
Right. And how long have you been doing that?
So since 2018.
Really? And are you enjoying it?
Most days, no. I love the community side of it.
Right.
With the polarization in politics nowadays, I don't necessarily enjoy that. I'm a pretty middle of the road guy. I think parties have broken a lot of that. We all have a lot of problems, but parties don't have a monopoly on solutions. So it makes it hard when you're trying to get policy done for our state.
Well, I mean, you've made it very clear through a lot of your decisions that you're okay with being alone in your decision.
Yeah. Hey, you know what? I think standing and being principled is an okay thing. What did Martin Luther King say? It's never a bad time to do the right thing. Right. I think, I just take what I've learned and go down there and represent my district really well. I find that if people get to know you and understand your thought process, they're generally okay with your decision making because they know that you were thoughtful about it.
Mm-hmm. So recently, jumping right into it, dealing with redistricting, as I said before, you were kind of a lone voice when it came to that.
Yeah, that was interesting. I believe our redistricting process is broken right now. The majority party gets to draw the lines. So I always like to say Republicans break it in Republican states and Democrats break it in Democrat states. The problem is, the speaker and leadership get to draw those lines. In our case, they want to know where your address is and all this stuff. Well, that shouldn't matter when you're doing it based off census tract data, okay? A lot of people have said, hey, why don't we go through a different process where we do an independent commission? Some states do that. I don't actually believe there is a truly independent commission. There's always going to be...
Was there a bipartisan effort brought forward for everyone to kind of work together on this?
No, there's not. I think... that's what the independent commission is supposedly going to do. Mm-hmm. There was a bill that was filed by Senator Townsend a number of years ago before I was involved that would have done that. I actually proposed something brand new that's never been done before, and it was based off a peer review study out of Carnegie Mellon. Mm-hmm. And you have kids. So basically, if you let one of your kids cut the cake, right? Mm-hmm. One of your other kids might say, well, I think that piece is bigger, that piece is better than the other. That's actually what we would do with redistricting. It's kind of like the NFL draft with food. So we would sit across from each other. You choose members from each party to sit across from each other. The majority party would get first pick, then cut, and the other party would then come back and make their selections till it was all over. Mm-hmm. And the idea is everybody feels like they're getting a little bit out of it. So the thought process is politics shouldn't be involved with it. My argument is you're never going to remove politics from it. So let's show the people in a very transparent way where the politics are.
And how was that taken when you presented that?
I presented that back in my first session ever. I also presented live streaming, and I was met with silence on both accounts. Well, then a pandemic hit. Live streaming was the only way we could do it. So it kind of foreshadowed that one. This one I still think, I think if it was a Democratic idea, it might have some traction. The fact that it's coming from a Republican, maybe not, right? Mm-hmm. All I really ask for is a committee hearing so we can have a public process about it. I'm not saying it's the right or wrong way to do it, but I do believe that everyone semi-agrees that redistricting is broken and that we should have a conversation on how to fix it.
I agree. I do think that it's broken, but I agree with you to the point where there's no other, to me, solution other than having a third party come up with things and review and censor as well, you know, and all of that should be known to the public as it's happening.
Yeah.
I can't feel comfortable as a constituent unless that's being done when you're drawing district lines for my community.
Yeah, I found that during the process too, most people didn't realize about it until after the fact. So how does that happen? You need all news outlets talking about it.
Right.
You only have the reach that you have, right, to let people know about it. The reason why I went with the new option, right, a new innovative option versus doing an independent commission was I've been on a lot of task forces. I'm actually on 9 currently. And what I find is there's always someone placed there to make sure other things do not happen.
Right.
And so that's where I felt like the independence side of it's not happening, and you need to share the transparency of
absolutely, and that's the part of this show. We want people to know, as you're in those task force, who is blocking the door, so to speak, to make things happen. And it's important for everyone to know, because that comes down to ethics.
It does.
It comes down to ethics, and there's been so much, I guess, happening over the past 5 years. And I mean, politically, we have had to, I guess, have caution when it comes to things. And we have to understand that, you know, our politicians make mistakes, but they need to be monitored. And I know that the city has passed, I spoke to the president of the city council, and they passed something great in regards to ethics within their organization, within the city.
Okay.
How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think anytime you can pass anything to raise higher ethical standards, that's fantastic. I think U.S. News and World Report has Delaware at either a D- or an F in terms of transparency. So, you know, that's something that I always look at and just say, how can we make things better? That was the point of me proposing the resolution where we almost become C-SPAN and we live stream everything so people can see.
Technology is available to rectify this issue.
And I am younger, so I feel like that's one of the things you know, I can speak about and bring to the table a little more. Yeah, we've had a lot of, I'd say, ethical dilemmas down there in Dover. I'm a big believer in the two-party system when it's working, but in most states right now, except I think all but 2, you only have one party ruling every branch of government. And when that happens, more ethical challenges arise because we have less checks and balances to those things.
Agreed. So this week it's been I guess a pretty busy week in the paper down in the House, and a lot of stuff going on.
Yes, a lot. Always some new things always seem to be popping up.
Right.
Yes.
And you've made a comment in regards to, I guess, Darius Brown and some of the things that are going on with him, and what were some of your opinions with that?
Yeah, I mean, to be perfectly blunt, you know, I don't think Senator Brown ever even commented on the accusations and things that were out there. He does get his day in court. That has now been postponed. At the same time, as a body, it's up to us to manage the things that he can vote on or the say that he has in committees and the power that he oversees. And you know, another thing, I had a real problem with him getting a job that has to do with the stuff that he was voting on. So I think there's a lot of ethical dilemmas around that situation. When it comes to the House, we can't file an ethics committee around a member of the Senate, but I did call on the senators that overlap with me to do so. At the end of the day,
also on social media.
This message is brought to you by Newcastle County Government.
Many wonder, what is a variant? A variant is a mutation or a change in the genetic sequence of the virus. Some of our methods of treating COVID-19 become ineffective. If we were to simply get vaccinated, we could decrease the spread and the likelihood that a mutation would form in the first place. Let's get vaccinated.
Social media, you made it very
I
clear.
made it very
You
clear
challenged
where I was. Yeah, I didn't want to, you know, I think enough is enough. My mom was a person who overcame domestic violence before she passed away. At the end of the day, I think one of the worst things you can do is hit a woman as a man and overshadow that with the power that you hold. Even so, you know, showing up to bill signings and doing the things that you're doing and not having any accountability with us as your colleagues also is something that I want to challenge you on. We have to work with you, and I think it's becoming of you to, be a man, step up and, apologize where you can, or at least say something. Say something like, advice of my attorney, I'm not able to talk at this time and I hope to address it with you when I can.
Right.
And that's fine. But not addressing it and continuing on and being able to yield power over situations, that's not fair.
No, it's not. And I want to make it very clear, these are allegations
They are.
of
They are.
violence, not ones that we know for sure that have been, rendered in court.
Correct.
But at the same time, I think your sentiments are very close to ours as far as our stance here as a network on domestic violence. But it also goes to really ensuring that ethics goes beyond just what bills are being signed and how we do business, but the conduct of our legislators during session, after session, in their own personal time.
Yeah, I think, look, we're all people, we're all flawed at the end of the day, but we are elected by the people, and so we should be held to a higher standard by those people. And, I think one of the biggest debates was, hey, Senator Brown did this, but Representative Bennett did this, and so-and-so did this. Representative Brady did this, and the auditor did Y. I think the hard part is there's different rules in the House and the Senate, right, for dealing with those different situations, depending on what elected position you are. No, it's not. And actually, that's what I brought up when it came to the auditor. I said, one of the main things I'm learning here is that for future bodies, we need to change the rules so we are better equipped to handle these situations. And so that's what I'm hoping to work on with Representative Lynn and some others in the coming weeks.
So could you give us some examples of some things that you're going to be working on with
Yeah, so for instance, it's not really spelled out how we handle the auditor, for instance, right? Like, in my opinion, and I believe I put this on social media, I'm not sure if I did or not, but to me, any other job in America, you would have been asked to take a leave of absence. We would have both been put on a leave of absence, right, in regular jobs. So the fact that you can have those allegations, and again, they are allegations, and she deserves her day in court, but when you have people that are whistleblowers and you have monetary allegations by the fiscal watchdog of the state, from a leadership perspective, I think you should take a leave of absence. We don't have any teeth as a legislative body to do that. We can do an ethics committee against one of our own members, right? But in terms of her, we need to have more teeth in order to handle that situation. And so one of those things is to spell that out in the House rules through changing the Constitution.
Okay.
And so that's what we would have to do. And in fairness, we don't want to just do that for the auditor. We need to be more thoughtful about that.
Right, so is this a bipartisan effort? Or is
Absolutely,
this...
absolutely,
Okay.
yeah.
So good, so as long as that is fair across the board and everyone is I guess treated the same.
Correct, we need
regardless
it for all
of
positions.
Yep. Regardless of positions.
Well, it got brought up. Well, gosh, the treasurer deals with money, right? I mean, the treasurer needs to be held to the same standard, even though the treasurer hasn't been accused of anything, right? So, but we all need to be held with the same standard as elected officials.
Well, I hope it has teeth.
I hope so too. I guess we'll find out when we get back down there. That's one thing that's great about being in person versus being on Zoom. You get to interact with your colleagues more, work face to face and work it out, so.
Well, let me make you very popular on the agenda.
Okay.
You are sponsoring a bill to have wine shipped through the mail to residents of Delaware.
Yes, we are one of 3 states that does still not have direct shipment of wine. It has been a big debate in Delaware for decades at this point. The 2 groups holding it up are the retailers and the Teamsters.
So tell us, help me understand this as a constituent and as someone who just wants their libations sent to their home.
Sure.
Why would they have a problem with that?
So Delaware has something called the 3-tier system, and they don't want to change that, and direct shipment would help change that. From the retailer's perspective, they want to have control of what's entering the market, right? So my bill I would call the most compromised bill that's ever been put out there. So wine clubs and things like that wouldn't be included in that, but the small business itself would. That small winery or any winery you go to, you'd be able to direct ship that.
Right.
You would actually limit it by quantity and a few other things. My point in doing that was you then give the retailer more teeth to show them that there's a market out there for them. It's the retailer that these are new wines. These aren't going to take away from what the shopping experiences at their locations, because these aren't things that are currently being served. Maryland's a good model. They actually did an impact report on direct shipment, and it just showed it actually added value to the retailers.
And they're taxing that as well.
And they're taxing that, so it's a revenue stream as well. So we'll see. I'm cautiously optimistic about that, but it is something that, again, I believe that if multiple states that surround you, and Delaware is very unique in that way, but if multiple states around you, 2 or more, are already doing something, we'd be smart to do it, because
why reinvent the wheel?
In my district, we're right on the line with Pennsylvania, and then you go into Newark, you're right on the line with Maryland, so we're right there. People are driving over the line every single day to have it shipped to a friend, a family member's house, and then just bringing it right back over.
Right.
Why wouldn't we tax on that?
So the other thing is, I guess, equality and equity when it comes to, I guess, recipients due to the wholesalers, right? There were some issues. We had an interview here on the agenda where a local restaurateur said, I'm just not getting alcohol, right? Because I don't buy in a volume that's great enough, but I do buy for a necessity for my business. It was a bourbon establishment that couldn't get bourbon. And they had to go through such a hassle in order to get it, to make sure that their product was getting shipped to them. Would this alleviate anything with spirits, or is this just wine?
It wouldn't alleviate with spirits, and the only reason for that, to be honest with you, is I believe in modeling legislation, meaning let me show you it'll work, and then you can do something else with it. Now, there is a legislator who has one out there for beer, wine, and spirits, and that would alleviate that.
Okay.
But if people are having heartburn over just wine, I don't know how we get there without trying this first.
We're going to get there.
So I think we just have to try it and show them that this is a value add for you.
I do believe this is going to be a bipartisan issue for a lot of people.
It is.
You know, everybody, you know, not everyone. I take that back. But people do enjoy having a good time with a bottle of wine, so regardless of their party. So I'm pretty sure you're going to get some traction on this.
I like to break down the party lines to make it pretty simple. This one is very simple. You're either for special interests or you're for your consumer, which is your constituent.
Right.
It's really that simple.
Right.
So I guess we'll see where people go. As long as we can get a committee hearing and a vote, we'll see where people land on it.
So another bill, that you're trying to get traction on is dealing with online gambling.
Yeah.
Now that's a vast amount. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I think. So one, let me step back. I think during the pandemic, you see a lot of different things. A man by the name of Dave Portnoy popped up with Barstool Sports, right? I think what happened was the Barstool Fund, and it got a lot of people to understand what he's involved with and what he's doing. But then you had all these people that were already involved in FanDuel and some of these other groups. And come to find out, it's just like direct wine.
Right.
People are driving right over the line, placing their bet on their mobile phone, and then coming back, and we're not seeing any of that.
Right.
Okay.
So what do we have now? We have the
we have the parlay cards,
parlay
cards, which through my research and through my conversation so far, I've learned is actually a great financial boon to the general fund. So we don't want to hurt that, but I think the Delaware Lottery and the casinos will agree. There is a segment of the population of age. They don't know, and I'm sorry to do this, but they don't know anything other than this, a cell phone. They don't.
Right.
They're not going to do or place a bet on anything else, but they will on this. That's where they do everything. So I think there's a segment of people that will add to the general fund if they'd be willing to do that.
How do we add to the general fund with this? What is it? How does the money roll back down to us?
Yeah, so basically it would be taxed to a certain percent. So most likely the Delaware Lottery gets a piece, and either they run it and the casinos get a piece, or they run it, right? I would prefer the Delaware Lottery to probably run it. That way it kind of all runs through the same cycle to the general fund. It makes it cleaner. And then it depends on the percent that you tax. I think if you look at New York, they taxed it at almost like a 50% or more rate, which any gaming company is going to come in. They don't necessarily want that, right? But they know they have to be in the market in order to be in their next market, to be a part of the total share. Now, some of these sports books then come in. That's where the casinos come in.
Right, I've seen that, and we're talking about neighboring states, right?
Correct.
So New Jersey, which is a neighboring state, has really led the way in this. Especially, you can see commercially what's going on with them Is that a model that we can just use and continue with?
I think, again, just like most other things, 2 or more states are doing it. So
Right.
you see what percentages they tax at, you see how it's affected them,
Right.
and then you customize it to Delaware. I think one of the problems we have in Dover, and they probably have it in a lot of other states as well, is you just see a bunch of bills come through that were rubber stamped in other states, so you think it'll work in our state without customizing it to
I don't
how
want to
our
hear that.
state
Please
is.
tell me that's not what's
So-
happening. Please tell me that's not what's happening.
So you know what I mean, but
Yeah.
we just we don't make it Delawareified enough.
Right.
So I think we just have to do that. And I think this is a bill, just like direct shipment of wine, that we'd be stupid not to do. And I think the Delaware Lottery knows. Well, we know it's coming, but
Right.
and that's here with wine. We know it's coming, but well, everybody else is already doing it. We've learned enough. We now have to act. We got to stop talking about it.
So, again, I'm sure a lot of people want you to have traction on this one. I mean,
And I don't even gamble, so I mean, you know, but
Neither
I
do
want
I.
everyone to have the opportunity, if they'd like to be at their house and
Yeah.
do that if they'd like to.
I don't lose well.
Yeah. I don't, no, I'm into sports. I don't lose well either.
Yeah.
But I was telling the speaker, you know, can you imagine all the people that come in from Maryland, New Jersey, New York, et cetera, over the summer for months on end? If you think about, I was a baseball player and basketball player, and if you think about some of the lines of the starting pitchers and things like that, people want to make those bets when they're here, the
Right.
day of a game or the night before. They don't want to do it a week before or when they're leaving for vacation.
Right.
So I think we're going to get a lot of out-of-state money poured into this too that we wouldn't normally get.
Yeah. Well, 'tis the season, okay, and social media has you out there and in your community doing a lot. So
Yeah.
what's going on with that?
Yeah, so one thing my wife and I are very much into giving back. We hate the word politician because I talk trash on politicians all the time, but we're big on the whole public service side of being a public servant. And so we try to give back in numerous ways. One is we do an annual toy drive with Kind of Kids to make sure every kid in Delaware's foster care system has a good Christmas.
Okay.
If you've ever...
I like that.
Yeah, so my grandmother grew up in the foster care system. She raised me. We went through a lot of trauma together. And so that's one way for me to remember my grandmom in a positive way, help a constituent who runs an organization, and then help every kid in foster care. So really it's a win-win-win. And the idea of it is foster care kids are used to just, you know, they're taking their stuff in a bag and they're going. Nothing is ever new and given to them. It's always a hand-me-down. So this is a way of no matter what, they can come in, choose what they want, it's theirs. You know, and you kind of give them more hope and break that cycle that they're used to of moving from house to house, situation, dealing with new personalities and people, and just trying to break the cycle that, you know, that they're currently in. And I
Try
think
to build a little normal in a difficult situation. What we
Absolutely.
would consider to be normal and out of a difficult situation. and do
Absolutely.
so, and seeing the caring of the community that's around them. I think
Yeah,
that's all.
you know, good always compounds more good if you can do that. So
I agree. We are fortunate enough to be in this state where there is a tremendous amount of funds that will be available through infrastructure, through the Build
Yeah.
Back Better, through the bond bill. What are we doing? What is going on in Dover to ensure that that's being passed out?
sure, I mean, I'm going to be 100% transparent and blunt with you. The General Assembly doesn't get much say in that.
Okay.
So
And how do you feel about that?
I think that is terrible. I think as 41 representatives, we represent our different districts throughout the state, and we probably know best through the help of our community leaders of where that money should go. So I think it's empowered a few versus enabling the whole. And I wish we did have more say in that. But you know, I am a big fan of how the governor thinks about it. And that's one-time costs. You know, don't create a new budget line item that we're not going to be able to pay in
Be able to
perpetuity. But let's do some one-time things. Our roads are extremely important. Our infrastructure is extremely important. I actually had a wild idea that I mentioned on my podcast the other day. Imagine if, you know, a lot of people have said a lot about the vaccination status of people and the masking and all this and all that. And I said, it's really the value proposition of how it's being presented there, right? Like a lot of nurses worked overtime and were burned out and then got laid off because they didn't get their vaccination. And that's up to them, right? I mean, they didn't, so they knew the consequence of that. But at the same time, then the hospital turns around and asks the federal government and the state for money to help their workforce dilemma. Well, you kind of created the workforce dilemma. And so for me, it's a different value proposition. Could you imagine if we actually became job creators in the way we thought about health? So instead of doing that, we actually gave each individual a exercise counselor, a nutrition counselor, a mental health counselor, and a gym membership, and we focused on our whole health.
Well, I think part of their reason was to help curb the pandemic and, and to understand that those nurses are carrying that virus because they're front line. Right?
Yeah, everybody handles it a little bit differently. I think Easter Seals is an example of how to be creative in handling that. So for those that didn't, they actually created a bubble area where they're in that building providing care and doing things versus that. Look, neither of them pay me, so I'm not there to make the decision for them.
Right.
But I do think the pandemic has brought out a lot about how creative organizations can be on solving problems.
So how creative do you think our state was in solving problems during the pandemic?
Not very creative.
State
at
legislature.
all. Yeah, I would just say we always seem like we're behind our neighboring states on how we respond to things, and the decisions that we make just kind of mirrored that in a lot of different ways. I think, one thing I always have said throughout this whole time, though, I don't know anyone that would have wanted to be a governor in any state, any situation.
It wasn't a job that you were raising your hand for.
No, so I give Governor Carney a lot of credit. I think everybody was doing their best and learning on the fly. I talked to some of my colleagues across the aisle now, and I almost feel like we need to get in like pandemic 2.0. So we were in the response, we're in the heart of it. How are we handling it? Now we need to figure out how you live with it and make the best for everybody. So, a lot of people categorize those things. It's, mandates versus adapting to the market, right? Where the money flows so that in a couple years we actually see direct impact. Because a lot of people had to be rescued through the whole thing, but you also have to think, how can you build off of that, right? And put your state in a good...
How can we continue that? Is that the human infrastructure side of the infrastructure bills that are being passed?
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, I have a family background where I had a family member die of heroin overdose. I've seen alcoholism. I've seen a lot of mental health disorders. And the problem with a lot of the things is we've compounded those issues. So we need to come out of it stronger in that capacity and from an infrastructure standpoint so we can handle the social dilemma that's kind of come out of that as well.
And we have plenty of them.
Yes.
Plenty of dilemmas for us to
there's not a shortage, unfortunately. Unfortunately.
Well, before we go, what's next for you?
What's next for me? Well, my number one priority is always being a good dad and a good husband, and I have 3 awesome boys. I didn't have a dad around, so no matter what I do in my life, as long as they grow up and they become successful members of society, I think I've done a good job. I got a Facebook message on my state account the other day from a mother in my son's school, and I think as a parent you'll probably agree with this. Sometimes you just wonder if you're doing it right? And I think day to day that's, you can probably change that definition a little bit. You do your best. Right. But she actually just wanted to send me a note and say you should be extremely proud of your son. When these kids were bullying my daughter, he stepped up and stood up for her. When they called her dumb and stupid, he stayed with her after school and helped her finish her project. And I don't know if he's told you that, but I just want to let you know that you should be proud. And, I get the typical thing at home. How was your day? Good. Good. Yeah, So honestly, that's my number one goal, just to be a good parent. I think if we all focused on our individual families a little bit, man, we'd solve a lot of the problems that we see every day.
I couldn't agree with you more. Well, it's been a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for joining us here on The Agenda.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We hope it's not the last time. We'd like to thank Representative Mike Smith for taking the time to speak with us today. I think he's a fantastic representative, and he's a very transparent one, and you could probably see that from the interview. I'd also like to take the time to talk about the importance of ethics and dealing with transparency throughout the State House and throughout the Senate, and how important it is for conduct of our legislators, that they understand that they are role models nonetheless. You don't really get a choice in the matter. You have to be responsible for your actions. I'd also like to thank him for a strong and reliable COVID messaging, making sure that people understand that the vaccination is safe and that it is important for you to go out and get it. As always, I look forward to seeing you next week on the agenda.